And we are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's the one, the only V, the Guerrilla Economist, and we are back for another Hanging with Harley. And my main man, Harley Schlanger, is here. He needs no introduction. So sit back, relax, fasten your seatbelts, grab a cold one, grab your notebook, whatever you got to do. It's your time to do it because Harley's going to break down the entire geopolitical landscape in the 20 minutes that we have him with. So without any further ado, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing.
Fantastic, man. I mean, you're going through a cold spell over there, where you are in Germany. We've been talking about the same thing here, but there's many spells going on in many places in politics, it seems, Harley. So where do you want to begin?
Well, let's take the hottest developments, which have been the motion toward collaboration between
Yes.
Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping. This is exactly what the British did not want to see. This
Right.
is what the whole Putin did it, Trump is incompetent, uh, Michael Flynn has to go, Trump has to go. All of this loud, deafening roar in the background has been about preventing Trump from following through with talking to Putin, working with Putin, and with Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
We saw something that I think is quite interesting, which is there was a trap set for Trump around the whole Syria development. And I think sooner or later, Trump is going to figure out, if he hasn't already done so, that this was an operation against him. Had nothing to do with the Assad regime launching a chemical strike, and that he really has an apology to make, which I understand it's tough for Trump. But this week, two developments, the two most important developments, the continued collaboration with Xi Jinping to cool out the situation in North Korea.
Yeah.
And secondly, the Putin Trump phone call, which now has put a number of things in motion, including sending a top official from the State Department to the Syrian reconciliation talks in Astana, Kazakhstan.
Right.
Now, the importance of this is that this had been previously a Turkish, Iranian, Syrian, Russian operation. Now the US is involved. And of course, the Syrian opposition walked out of the talks yesterday
Yes, he did.
because he said, well, Syria is bombing our people, so we're not going to have these reconciliation talks. Well, stop cutting off people's heads. Stop murdering your fellow Muslims and Christians, and maybe they'll stop blowing you up.
Right.
What
Exactly.
Trump said after the call with Putin is that there was a discussion of two fronts. One was coordinating the fight against the terrorists,
Yeah.
which we all knew was coming at one point or another. The second thing was the establishment of secure or safe zones. Now, this is very different than what was done in Libya, which is really just a pretext to just with the no-fly zones, and also very different from what Hillary Clinton wanted to do in Syria, which was to destroy Assad's army. What Putin and Trump agreed is to have the military get together
Hmm.
to work on a plan to drive the terrorists out of certain areas and then set up protection in those areas so people can live there.
Right.
So this is very significant. And this is, of course, why we had so much of an attack on Trump, that this is one of the things they were afraid of, was this kind of reconciliation. Now, next week, there's the Belt and Road Initiative Conference in Beijing. It still remains to be seen who will represent the United States there.
Hmm.
It would be great if Trump went, but I don't think he will. But this is going to be at least 28 heads of state, over 100 nations involved, and they're going to be discussing how to cooperate on global infrastructure.
Yeah.
So it's if at the conference we just had at the Schiller Institute in New York City, Helga Zeppler said something that shocked a lot of people. She said, if Trump takes up seriously the proposals from Xi Jinping for joint cooperation, then he could go down in history as one of the great US presidents.
Right.
Helga said
Absolutely.
that. At the same time, the 100-day grading of the Trump should be impeached. He should have been impeached already. Trump is incompetent. He's reckless. He's dangerous. So you have to wonder, what world are they looking at? Now, I had an interesting discussion with an insider with Trump yesterday who made an interesting point. He said, first they cheered or they attacked Trump for wanting to talk to Putin. Then they cheered when he sent missiles into Syria.
Yeah.
Then they said he's got to get tougher with countries. And then Trump said, you know, Kim Jong Un is a pretty smart cookie. I'd be willing to talk to him if that would help things. And now they're saying Trump is consorting with authoritarians and dictators. So, what do they want him to do? Blow countries up?
It, it,
When he was threatening to blow countries up, they accused him of being reckless. Now that he's saying let's talk, they're saying he's naive and stupid.
the insatiable left, Harley.
Well, I wish it were just the left. I'm afraid
Yeah, the insatiable establishment. Let's put it that way.
it's the center establishment, the right establishment, the
Right.
right wing press in Britain as well as the Guardian. The Guardian is, the left wing. It's the leader in the anti-Trump coverage in England.
Right.
But it's across the board. It's everywhere. Then the other big issue, which we've been following, is the continued kerfuffle over Glass-Steagall. And Trump did his interview with Bloomberg last week, where he said he's looking into it. He's studying it seriously. And within an hour, the bank stocks collapsed. And then a few bankers came out and said, "Oh, don't worry, it'll never happen."
Harley, you got cut off. Harley, you got cut off. What'd you say? You met with the bankers and they say it'll never happen with the
So
Glass Steagall?
the bankers were telling the media
Yeah.
it will never happen, and so the stocks went back up.
Hmm.
But I think it's going to happen. Trump does want to get rid of Dodd-Frank. He had his second meeting with community bankers. That was right before the interview with Bloomberg on Monday or Tuesday.
Yes.
And after that interview, there was a whole flurry of articles. The Financial Times has now run 8 articles since April 13th on why Glass-Steagall will not be voted up, why it won't work, why it would be disruptive, and how it never would have stopped 2008 anyway. So you wonder, why are they spending so much time on something that's a dead letter? Well, it's not a dead letter. We're dealing with a situation of an incredible buildup of corporate debt. I don't remember if we discussed this last Thursday, but $14 trillion in non-financial corporate debt in the
Yes.
system. How do you deal with that? And if you have interest rates going up, the International Monetary Fund said you get to 3 to 4% interest rates, and there's going to be 20% bankruptcy of American businesses. 20%, 1 out of 5.
Right.
Now, we're already seeing the collapse of the retail sector, some of which is based on the expansion of eBay and Amazon and online sales. But there's a consequence to that. The United States has 6 times per person more commercial real estate space than any country in the world.
Hmm.
And this real estate space, the commercial real estate space, has been turned into commercial mortgage-backed securities.
Yes, it has.
And so when Macy's cuts back, when Sears cuts back, you feel for the workers who lose their jobs, the stores shut down. But what happens to those commercial mortgage-backed securities? This is a huge vulnerability of the financial system. So that's why Glass-Steagall is either going to happen or the system's going to blow out.
Yeah. Absolutely correct. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of murmurings, especially from some of my sources as well, that Trump wants to break up the big banks. If he gets around to doing that, that'll be a great thing. And the other thing is this whole thing is about to collapse on its own, Harley. The paper manipulation is it doesn't have quite the impact that it used to have.
Well, what can you do? I mean, 20 some trillion dollars into the financial system in funny money.
Yeah.
And all it's done is increase the debt. So what are you going to do when someone has facing a bankruptcy? Give them more debt?
Right.
What do you do? So they did with Greece. How has that worked? It hasn't. Now we see in Europe, Alitalia, one of the once premier airlines in the world, is going into bankruptcy.
Hmm.
Air Berlin, which had a lot of money pumped into it by the United Arab Emirates, I think it lost $250 million last quarter.
Yeah.
It's in terrible shape. So these Western companies, Western corporations, mom and pop businesses, and families. Young
Yeah.
people who can't pay their student debt. There's been an increase in recalls and cars being taken back,
Yes.
repossessed. Uh, and now you have the auto industry is working on a standard of a 60-month sale item, a mortgage in a sense. 60 months.
Well,
For
it's gone beyond that. It's gone now. They're introducing 96-month finance terms for vehicles, Harley. 96 month.
I mean, it used to be the standard was 3 years and that's it.
Yep. Yep.
So they're loading up debt. The
Harley.
My friends here I talked to the other day was speaking at a pre G20 summit. The G20 is meeting in Berlin. I think
Right.
it's in June, and they had a series of presentations. And one of the things that came up is, what are you going to do about the German trade surplus, which is huge? And so the German finance minister Schäuble is saying, well, we're going to increase consumer spending. They say, how are you going to do that? And he said, well, tax cuts. Well, Germany is now facing, in many areas, including Berlin, bankruptcy. There's no money.
Right.
So if you cut the taxes now, it's not going to help. And so someone made a proposal. Why doesn't Germany rebuild its infrastructure? Now,
God forbid.
compared to the US, I have to say Germany's infrastructure is in pretty good shape.
Oh man,
But compared to Germany,
you guys have the autobahn. It's like my dream, motorways, man.
yeah, come over here, we'll take a spin.
I can't. I'm coming, Harley. I'm coming. The only reason for me to go to Germany is you, the autobahn, and the Nürburgring. That's it.
Well, we'll let my wife drive because she's a very fast driver.
I'll sit in the back seat.
But German infrastructure compared to 15 years ago is in terrible disrepair. Our national office in Germany is near Wiesbaden, which is in the Frankfurt area, and a bridge over the Rhine collapsed last year, and it's
Wow.
going to take 4 years to replace it. Now, we always had the joke in Houston, the Gulf Freeway is under construction. Well, it's been under construction since 1982 when I first moved to Houston.
Good
The
God.
Chinese are building 1,500-kilometer rail lines, high-speed rail, in 12 months in Africa,
Yes.
with African labor.
Right.
So the problem in the West is there's no will, there's no
There's no
intent.
will. Well, case in point, look at the USS Gerald R. Ford, the newest debacle that we call a weapon system. It's taken 10 years to build that thing, and it's already underwent sea trial. The Chinese just put out a new indigenously built aircraft carrier. They did it in less than 2 years.
What's very much like the difference between the British and the Germans before World War One, when the British were very worried because the class ship that the Germans built was not only superior to the British, this is in around 1902,
Right.
but they did it twice as fast. So you know what the British did? In terms of their own economy for steel and coal and areas that had immediate military implications, they went to a Hamiltonian credit system and protectionism
Yeah.
against what they were forcing on every other country in the world so they could build up their own industry.
Well, you look at that.
So, unfortunately, war causes these kinds of decisions to be made. But I think, look, people should be really, you have to look at the way in which our cynicism works.
Mm,
Because when Trump bombed Syria, all of a sudden you had all these articles, Trump was never any good, all these things about Trump. It's never been about Trump. Trump is a vehicle for a set of ideas that are competing with a whole lot of bad ideas that have already failed.
right.
And Trump is smart enough to know he's got to move away from some of those bad ideas, like confronting Russia over Ukraine or arming terrorists in the Middle East as Obama did. I think a lot of people have forgotten how bad Obama was. But
Oh,
Obama
totally.
was arming terrorists throughout North Africa and the Middle East. So you get all the negative press against Trump, the pushback against everything he's trying to do, and then he makes a mistake, and people say, "Oh, it's all over. It was only a dream. You guys are naive. they will always win. Well, I'm not convinced they'll always win. I'm
Right.
convinced that people who are stupid enough to believe the mainstream media, and it's interesting because people know the mainstream media is wrong, but then they believe them when they say this isn't going to happen.
Hmm.
You won't get a U.S. Russian rapprochement. Well, let's see. Let's fight for it and see what happens.
Absolutely. Uh, I mean, it was very encouraging to see that the call with Putin. I love the fact that he muzzled the Waffle House waitress Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
I was very pleased with that. Her just sitting there in the UN Security Council, just making up things that the Russians have never even done or even said, just pulling it out of the thin air. Like she was consorting with the what's his name, Lindsay Tickle My Butt Graham.
Well, you heard about the exchange between Graham and Comey. Graham
No,
said to Comey, and when are we going to get more on the Russians? What's your view of the Russians?
Jesus.
Then Comey said, the greatest threat to civilization we've ever seen. So for those who think Comey's a great patriot,
Wait,
uh,
Comey said the Russians are the greatest threat to civilization we've ever seen.
yeah, yeah.
What an idiot! He should have
Well,
been fired on the spot for that statement. That dumb.
he's qualified on a number of levels to be fired. But this is the institution. The FBI, this is the J. Edgar Hoover tradition. The only problem was Comey didn't deliver it in drag.
That's next. Well, you got Lindsey Graham to do it.
Yeah, that's
You know,
true.
tickle
The
my
lady
butt.
of the
Graham would
Senate.
do it, huh?
Yeah, the lady of the Senate, as
The lady, the lady of the Senate. You're right about that.
I
That's what
believe it was
Ginsburg called her.
Ginsburg said that. Yeah,
Yep.
so that was pretty good. But you got people like McCain running around. McCain says there's still so much that we don't know about the Russians. Well, if we haven't found it out by now, that means that all our surveillance, all our satellites, all our human intelligence, everything that we have, if the Russians are really doing this, everything we have is incompetent.
Yeah.
Or you're making it all up.
Right.
And the problem is that what I've been talking to people about in the US, Trump and others, to come out and identify the British as key to this. Boris Johnson, the foreign secretary, is a lunatic. Fallon, the defense secretary, and I don't know if you saw this, V, but with the parliament dismissed now by by Theresa May because of the election coming up, Britain decides to go to war. It's a choice made by May, the Queen
Repeat
Elizabeth.
that again. When the Parliament is dismissed, because you got cut out.
Yeah, when the parliament is dismissed,
Yeah.
the decisions of war and peace are made by the prime minister and the queen. There's no parliamentary hearing, no parliamentary opposition allowed. Now, what Fallon said is that if the British decided it was necessary to strike Syria or North Korea, they could do it based on a new attorney general's ruling in Britain, which says that it doesn't matter what the UN says or what the international human rights says. The British have the right to act when their national interests are. You have a situation, and I'm not saying that the Brits are about to go bomb North Korea, but it could happen. They could threaten that as a way of trying to force the US to preempt it.
Yeah.
So it's a very dangerous situation. And unless Trump addresses this British problem, and then the other problem he has to address is Mrs. Merkel, because she went and met with Putin and suddenly became a big proponent of rights for Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia. Uh,
What?
that's what she raised with Putin, that the
Why is that
Russian
an issue? I don't understand.
human rights. The
For
Russians are
Jehovah's
suppressing.
Witnesses, they don't have human rights.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Putin could have raised the question of Scientologists in Germany because they've been pretty much kicked out of the country.
Sure.
No, it's this tit for tat human rights stuff. Now, you probably saw what Tillerson said. We're no longer going to make our values a litmus test for countries. He said we have our values, but then we have policies. And our
Yeah.
values, defending these values like human rights, like
Harley, you got cut. Harley?
Tillerson said, Yeah, am I
I'm
there?
sorry. Yeah, you got cut off for a second. You said when you values and Tillerson.
Yeah, Tillerson said we're no longer going to, in other words, human rights. In
Yeah,
other words, responsibility to protect. We're not going to do regime changes because someone doesn't do what we do.
absolutely. Because I mean, human rights is such an ambiguous term to begin with.
And this is an important distinction that he's making, which
Yeah,
is part of what you might call the Trump doctrine, which is that we're going to operate from our strongest national interests in collaboration with recognizing that other nations have national interests as well.
sure, absolutely.
That's a big change.
These are all very good changes on the international level. I think it's starting to seem that these cruise missile strikes were what they were. It was a well-planned ruse to get these guys shifted and off balance, so the real international diplomacy could come into play. I think it was also a ruse to have somebody like the Waffle House waitress Nikki Haley to be the UN the ambassador to the UN, allow her to shoot her mouth off, make the neocons think that they're that they have a voice within the office, and then turn her on her heel. Now it's left to the it seems that we got the internet the international things that we need to take care of, but also the domestic issues, especially economically. What's your opinion on Gary Cohn still and Kushner still running around? What's the latest on that? Are these guys going to get dealt with? Are they going to be muzzled or muffled or taken out of the picture?
You know, Kushner sort of looks to me like a Ken doll.
He
You
is.
know, the guy who's propped up to make the Trump family look good. That I really don't think he is controlling policy in all the areas he supposedly is.
Yeah.
I'm less worried about him than I am McMaster. But you know, McMaster can be brought under control, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, I wish that it were as simple as you just said, that this was done as a ruse to try and pull things into shape. I really
Yes.
think
So do I.
that you have some traitors in there who really are trying to jam up everything.
Mm,
And and on occasion, they've been successful at bending Trump's ear. I think ultimately Cohen is that kind of person, very forceful personality, but I don't think his agenda and the agenda Trump campaigned on are the same.
right.
I think that there's going to be a day of reckoning for some of these guys. I hope so. Or, you know, maybe they'll be allowed to coexist and shoot off their mouth and have no influence over policy. That's the other
Right.
possibility. But
Right. Harley?
yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry, you got cut off. You said I?
yeah, I don't think it's so tightly controlled by Trump that he's able to pull something off that risked possibly going to war with Russia for the sake of some kind of domestic shift inside his cabinet.
Yeah, agreed. Harley, we are pretty much at the end of the show, man. Your last closing comments and how people
Well,
get
I
hold of you.
think this is the time that people have to be informed and be optimistic about the possibility of a revival of the United States in its best traditions.
Yeah,
And to do that, it's going to take a rallying of Americans. This is what Lyndon LaRouche has always been talking about. This is what I've been fighting for over 40 years. And I think we have a real opportunity to do that now. But it's going to require people getting smart, getting not just awake, but understanding some of the complexities in international strategic so we can get above geopolitics, which geopolitics is how you manipulate countries against each other, get above it and actually achieve a win-win relationship. So keep an eye on what happens in China next week. Go to LaRouchePAC.com for updates. This conference this is what you might call a game changer, the one in Beijing.
yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, Harley, thank you so much for being on, folks. We'll be on again next Thursday for another edition of Hanging with Harley. So keep it tuned here. You're getting, in my personal opinion, the best intel you could possibly listen to. He's the voice of reason in this chaotic world, Harley Schlanger. Thank you all for listening in. Take it away, CJ.